Kim was born in Finland to a British dad, Alan, and Finnish mother. Kim immigrated to Canada with his parents at 7 months old. He grew up in Vancouver and studied neuroscience at UBC and the University of Waterloo. He got a PhD in biopsychology that saw no moral future in ongoing animal experimentation, which was required in his research. So Kim shifted to social psychology while teaching at Mount Allison University in New Brunswick. A year later, he returned to Vancouver, welcomed with open arms by his dad, Alan, and stepmom, Elizabeth, and how wonderful to see Elizabeth here today. Kim soon met Jan, and they were engaged within a rather ecstatic first 5 days together. That's just so romantic. Within the year, they married and moved to Merritt for Kim's new teaching position at NVIT, a First Nations college in BC's interior. They wanted children, but struggled with infertility. But they shifted into caring for a very active foster child, Alexander, who would become Riley. Scrambling after, and is this Riley here? Oh, it is! Hello, Riley! Oh, wonderful. Scrambling after MVIT laid off a few whiteys, the fledgling family moved, this time to Logan Lake, where Kim landed a job as a substance abuse counsellor at a local youth custody centre. 2 years witnessing recidivism there was quite enough, and with encouragement and financing offered by his father-in-law, the decision was made for Kim to re-specialise in clinical psychology as the new millennium was about to turn. Now in his 3rd decade as a practicing clinical psychologist, Kim enjoys working out of his cosy home office and devotes himself to daily dog walks and helping Jan run a charity, Warm Hearts Pet Safe Havens, which aims to help women escape abuse together with their pets. Thank you so much for that biography, because we all knew your dad so well. It's wonderful to get to know you, Kim. Please take my phone.
Thank you, Di. Thank you. So good to be here, see all your wonderful faces, and share about my dad and other members of my family. Unlike my mother, who had not much use for people, really, my dad, Alan Dawson, cared deeply, as his kindness, compassion, and his work as a chaplain and hypnotherapist demonstrated. Beyond his intellectual interests and his impeccable memory, his day-by-day fathering of me began at my mother's behest. And when he told me of his experience bringing me away from my British and Finnish cousins when I was only 7 months old, as you heard, I sensed his reluctance about going along with this decision. And I still feel that loss. When I was 4, we adopted a Siamese kitten, a little alien being. Boy, could she yowl hauntingly. If you know Siamese, you'll know that's true. So began the teaching of caring for other life forms, my own sojourn into fathering many cats and dogs, and the occasional rat I had rescued from the lab. Beyond pets and into the wild, I vividly recall my dad telling me to run away from a mama bear in the Cypress Mountain woods. And what an honor it was when my dad took me to visit and actually play with a cougar cub living nearby us at a neighbor's in Vancouver. So from my dad, beyond the experience of owning pets, I learned a deep and balanced respect for wild animals. Through ongoing environmentally and politically aware fathering, Dad took me to the early 70s protests against US nuclear submarines in Nanoose Bay and included me in a group of Unitarians to help a Vietnamese draft dodger across the border. Around the same time, I think he understood the need to include the inner environment when he arranged for us to learn transcendental meditation together. I believe Dad realized this would become an important relationship building activity with Elizabeth, who would become my second mother. I was skeptical of TM at first, but found it both relaxing and comforting to my inner journeys, and yes, a way of bonding calmly with Elizabeth. Dad was devoted to fostering my development, built from the opportunity to explore and the necessity to caringly adapt to the unexpected, however stressful it might have been. For example, on a biking trip to Gabriola, pop, then and there was his opportunity to teach me how to fix a flat tire. His devotion extended to driving me to hockey practices before dawn, and he was there to watch almost every game. Ever since I broke my nose, boom, when shoved face first against the boards, Dad enjoyed recounting the story of my giddiness after the doctor stuffed cocaine-soaked cotton up my nose. No, things don't always work out the way we expect or desire. Confronting the gift of life at its most fundamental, Jan and I did not expect to have difficulty bearing a child. Our journey in parenting began with giving Jan hormone injections while Annie, our first dog, looked on perplexed. In 1995, we had been 3 years struggling with infertility. Coincidentally, Alexander was only 3 years old when he was dropped off at our home by a social worker with but a paper bag to his name. So touching. Alexander would begin to open our hearts. And his first day with us, he also began to teach me about creativity. He pointed to a spider and said, "Stoopy, it's Stoopy the spider." So from then on, we called spiders around the house Stoopy. He built forts out of blankets secured with string around rearranged living room furniture. And wow, did he paint his face a lot. So creative. Nightly, for a while, he had nightmares, and Jan sang him Ave Maria to help him go to sleep. At age 4 or 5, while walking in the woods nearby our first home in Merritt, Alexander told us he saw us out of the corner of God's eye and chose us then as his parents. As he grew, his genuine caring for others shone through on the soccer field when he was only 6. When Alexander saw another child fall, he would make sure they were okay, even running back into the school to fetch paper towels, wet paper towels, to put on their owies. I truly value the mothering and fathering roles Jan and I were able to play to nurture his ability to overcome the odds against him as a foster child and eventually become our adopted, dear, loved son and loving son when he changed his name to Riley around that time of his adoption. Riley graduated from high school, learned to cook in his 3-year stint at Earl's restaurant, to say nothing of what he learned from Jan, and nurtured his rapport with elderly folks when he worked for another 3 years at nursing homes here locally in Victoria. Now, it is part of my role in fathering Riley to publicize his ability to help people who are having challenges with navigating newfangled technology and phones. I see Sheva on one of his first customers. We were customers before Sheva, and so is my dad. So the rest is up to where this service goes and where you take your lives with this information, and hopefully interact and converse more with us about this brief biography I've provided. The only thing in my father and fathering journey that I regret is the long periods we've spent apart from each other. I'm so glad we were able to move to Victoria and all be together before my dad died. I feel truly blessed and proud to have both my dad and Riley in my life. Thank you.
And we feel blessed and proud to have you in our life. And Riley, how lovely to meet you. And Elizabeth, it's so good to have you back. And now, Sarah is speaking next. And Sarah, again, has hidden depths. Where is she? Oh, here you are. It's okay. It's okay, as you were. Just afraid she'd escaped. Sarah has an MA in geography and began working as a planner in Edmonton. She supervised the development of a new municipal general plan. After her stint in local government, she moved into consulting and for the next 30 plus years specialized in environmental education, science communication and participatory research. She wrote an award-winning guidebook for waterfront residents which sold over 20,000 copies, making it a 2-time Canadian bestseller. Sarah has facilitated dozens of workshops on topics like shoreline protection, climate change, nature protection and invasive plants to multiple user groups. She's advised scientists and governments in both Alberta and BC on ways to strengthen communications and outreach. For many years, Sarah lived on Gardon Lake near Salmon. For some of that time, she and her ex-partner ran a resort on the lake, endeavouring to create a small nature education centre there. She has 2 children, both of whom are working in environmental fields. Sarah was instrumental in founding 2 environmental stewardship societies in the Salmon Arm area and also served on the boards of 3 other groups. And of course, she's been on the board of Capital, serving as treasurer for over 2 years. Sarah completed her last consulting contract about 15 years ago and still writes. Now, mostly creative non-fiction and poetry, and she is beginning to see her work published. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Di. I think that's the longest bio I've ever heard about myself. So, thank you, Kim, for bringing so much emotion to your talk about Alan. So, my father is named Percy George Weaver, and he was born in 1920 in southwest England just after the end of World War I. And he was the youngest of 4 children. He didn't like his first name Percy, so he was always George. My dad overcame some very difficult circumstances at the beginning of his life. When he was just 4, his own father abandoned the family and ran off with a cousin. So my father grew up being told to tell others that his father had died. So basically, he was told to lie. He never saw or heard from his dad again. His uncle Percy, after whom he was named, had made money in Egypt and influenced family decisions after that. So Percy paid for my father, who was 8 years old, to be sent away to a British boarding school. And from the stories that we heard, it was a harsh bullying experience. When Dad was about 16, he started working in part to help support his mom. And just a few years later, one of his 2 sisters committed suicide. I don't know how he survived these events as intact as he did. He never talked about them. I only learned the stories years later after he died from my mother. Perhaps in a strange way, World War II helped. He was 19 when it broke out. He'd been an air cadet as a teen, and there's a photo that was used to illustrate this program, and it showed my dad, 15 years old, as a navigator, as an air cadet. And I didn't look behind me. Did you throw that slide up or not yet? Yeah. Okay. So the photo that Pedro threw up was of me and my dad when I graduated from high school. And sorry, I meant to talk about that earlier. So my dad, as an air cadet or somebody who'd gone through the air cadets, joined the RAF when World War II broke out. And he came to Canada to train to be a navigator. That's how he was introduced to this country. And being a navigator is where his abilities came into play. I had no idea what being a navigator entailed until I did some research for this talk, and I had to say I was pretty stunned. AI summarized it this way, and I'm going to quote: "The navigator of an Avro Lancaster bomber had to be a master of continuous mental arithmetic, dead reckoning, advanced radio, and celestial navigation, navigating by the stars. The navigator operated in a cramped, blacked-out compartment, and they were responsible for calculating courses, avoiding hazards, guiding the aircraft to the target and back over missions lasting many hours." And that's the end of the quote. So I found that very disconcerting, to say the least. After his experiences of the war, my dad was to become a pacifist, and later, with my mother, would found the Calgary chapter of Operation Dismantle. The purpose of Operation Dismantle was to generate a groundswell of support for nuclear disarmament across Canada. But now I've skipped ahead, so I'm going to go back. My dad and mom met a few years after the war. Dad was keen to leave the UK. Post-war England was bleak, and I think maybe more importantly, they both abhorred the social class system of the UK. As a kid, I didn't appreciate Dad's adventurous experience, leaving England, family on both sides, and moving to Canada reflected that spirit. He was the push for adventure between my parents. They started on a farm in Ontario, but could not stand the heat nor the humidity and moved west to Calgary. My dad's thirst for adventure affected me. I was just 18 when I traveled on my own to the UK and Europe for almost 4 months. And I worked in Spain without knowing any Spanish to begin with. Another way my dad's spirit played out was how my parents explored the area around Calgary when I was growing up. We had 4 children, so driving locally was something doable for them. On summer Saturdays, we jammed into my dad's tiny Austin and went exploring. We floated on our backs down the Highwood River, swam in the frigid waters of the Ghost Reservoir, and picnicked at the Big Rock, which is a glacial erratic for anyone who doesn't know. It's a gigantic rock randomly in the middle of a farmer's field near Okotoks. And we kids enjoyed clambering over it, and my parents would sit back to back on a car blanket on the grass, reading books while we played. Those outings really affected me and led to my love of nature. As our family grew, Dad became more focused on supporting us all. He played less and worked more. He had no further education except on the job. He'd been trained as a chartered secretary after the war. And a chartered secretary, as I understand it, is someone who learns about governance of companies and organizations. In Calgary, he worked at jobs like purchasing agent for companies, and eventually he became a systems analyst for a hospital district in Calgary. And I think in that last job, finally he was able to use the skills that he displayed as a navigator during the war. My dad was very reserved, gentle, and kind. Despite those traumas of his youth, he was not bitter. He had a mild sense of humor, which occasionally would come out. One of the few physical things of his that I still have is a collection of his poems written as a young man, most of which were lighthearted, reflecting that sense of humor. I'm sure that practice of writing poetry, just funny poems, helped him cope with the stresses of war, because most of the poems that I have were written during the war or just after. Sadly, my dad died far too young. He was only 64. He died of mesothelioma, which is the cancer associated with asbestos. And he was exposed to it in those Lancaster bombers in the war, and also in a house that we lived in when I was growing up, and he and a contractor pulled it down. After he died, a family friend established a memorial fund in his name. Donations were used to sponsor peace actions in Calgary through groups like Project Plowshares. Eventually, the fund was closed, and the principal shared among some of the Syrian families who were emigrating to Calgary. My dad was not to know that his firstborn son, my brother John, died young, and he only knew one of his 7 grandchildren. His passion for social justice and peace live on through his descendants and others he influenced. He would have been very happy with the way his grandchildren have developed and are contributing to the world in everything from social justice to the arts and to the environment. I'm grateful for the influence he had on my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. What a wonderful man. And we now know where you get your talent for poetry from. And I'm delighted to see him. Anyway, right, so John is next. Now, I asked for this bio some time ago, and I wasn't getting anything from John. So I did write a bio of my own for John, but he did deliver, so we're going to have his first. John thinks that he is hilarious, while his children would prefer he not talk to or make eye contact with people in public. He was born and raised in Alberta and finished his education there. His mother was very happy with the PhD, and John has worked as a private practice psychologist since 1987, working mostly in vocational rehabilitation, including providing opinions to the court system. John probably needs to retire. John has 2 lovely boys who you will be finding out about shortly. John is being held captive as a farm labourer. Please help John. Don't tell Ingrid. Now, just in case John hadn't come up with the bio, I did write one for him. It's brief. Most of us know that John is a clinical psychologist with a practice in Victoria, while also breeding goats in Saanich. What most of us don't know is that John started his career as a trapeze artist for the Cirque du Soleil. He went on to become an astronaut and is now a UN peace negotiator. We are very grateful to him for flying home from the Strait of Hormuz to be with us today.
Humor may be a feature. What the hell I'm going to do with that, I don't know. Okay, I have paper. A million years ago, I gave a talk to adoption triad. This is birth mothers, adoptees, adoptive parents. It's a sensitive group, and so naturally I led my talk with, in the beginning, there was frolicking, and it was good. What I was trying to do there, I wasn't run off the stage, so that's great. What I was trying to do there is say, we come to parenting and being parented in many different ways. Almost all of them are quite legitimate. So what I want to do now, decompensating is really kind of uncomfortable. You ever notice that? We write about it. What I want to tell you to do now is tell you the route that I took. So Sarah Comish and I had education, a house, reasonable resources, and it's time to have children. Yep, time to have children. Time. Now's good for me with the children. Well, it wasn't happening. So that led to infertility, your second story of infertility today. For me, it was the grand irony following years of efforts to prevent conception. I'm not getting any refunds on those condoms, just saying. We tried to conceive a child for 8 years. It always played in the background during that time, which allows some exposure to the medical machine of infertility. Women are faced with a barrage of invasive tests and treatments. When your loved one throws up in the car, you can't think that it's a good day. Men, on the other hand, get a tube for their sperm sample with some instructions. I didn't even read the instructions. I think I'm actually quite good at that sample thing. Eventually, it was time to move on from the infertility model to the next stage, adoption. Again, the second time you're hearing this today. As you might expect, about 80 to 90% of adoptive parents come to local or international adoption by infertility. And it was now time for that avenue. Strangely, perhaps, we ended up making connections through my former father-in-law to Mauritius, and through a head nurse that made the connection. So I was off to Mauritius now to adopt Evan. Now, I sent some pictures, but are they happening? Oh geez, I'm so nervous though. Oh,
I got this one.
I like that other one though. She was cute. Okay, great. So it's hard to describe this adventure, but it basically involved jumping on a plane to go to Heathrow. So running around, getting the tickets, you got the luggage, you got the whole thing. Luggage will turn out to be fairly irrelevant later in the story. And then you make it to Heathrow, and it's time to connect to the flight to Mauritius. And just like in the movies, we were late and they were early, and we had to run through Heathrow's big. So we had to run like crazy to get on this second flight. About 24 hours in total of airtime. Mauritius is down there. It's, around the other side. We got on the plane, and then a stewardess goes down the aisle spraying something, and I'm thinking, well, this is going well. When we got there, Mauritius has been under the control of various countries over the years. And at that point in time, and this is 35 years ago, it had just been under the UK. So it was like one of those disaster movies where the signs are breaking down and so on, and there's a highway, and you're driving very fast on that highway. So Mauritian sort of road rules at that time was seatbelts are for sissies, and we really need to share the lanes because there's a lot of us. So there would be a lot of tootling and honking, and I'm like, am I dying? What's going on? At least the seatbelt won't strangle me. So they were just telling each other, that's okay, we're close to each other. You got kind of used to it. When you got closer to the child, what my standard of care for a child might be wasn't theirs, but that child was not yours yet. So they would like to sedate the children to keep them quiet. Or at least that was what we were exposed to. And I was like, oh, gee, okay, yeah, wait, yeah, we're doing this. Oh, we see the judge next week. That's good. So you're working through this process to come to your son. Okay, now it does get kind of teary too, doesn't it? That's great. Got a wet mess. Okay, so we're driving on the system. We pull into this house and walk in, and there's a child sitting on somebody's lap, and they said, well, here's your son. I said, well, that's I don't know what I said. I think it was babbling and phonemes or something. The point being that it doesn't quite work that way, but I really enjoyed their enthusiasm. Over time, though, I also wanted to mention that an interesting element in this is that we had a contact person in Mauritius, and she was married to an inspector in the police who'd had a stroke, but anyway, to an inspector, and he had a sergeant. So when we came into the airport, there's this man with us, and he's sort of saying, no, and he's doing the Jedi mind trick on all the airport staff. No, they don't need luggage, that's for sissies. No. And when we had to go places, he would drive fast, and if there was like a crime or something, he would drive around the crime, because this was the mission. We raised Evan, and as the attachment grew, I remember heading into the world with a child who was clearly adopted, or as Evan would say, color-coded. I would wonder, what are people thinking? I would wonder, what am I thinking? How am I doing this? Dismantling racism wasn't really on the agenda there. Raising the child was. When we saw a psychiatrist for the diagnosis of ADHD, she was from Mauritius. She'd been trained in Mauritius. It was great because now you get the cultural norm built into your assessor. When she came out of her office, her hair was all over the place, and I could see that the bookshelves were broken down, and she just came up. I've always wanted to use this diagnosis. came up and said, "Oh, I think so." So you are now dealing with another culture, you're dealing with adoption, you're forming a strong bond with someone. We would read stories together and so on. It was lovely. I'm not really good at playing with kids, but both Evan and Juan ended up being quite good at playing with children. They do science camps and riding camps. I really thought I could learn from my father-in-law, though, who used to play the cave game. A tragedy has happened. He's one of the injured. He has to be on the couch and give some instructions to the children about what to do about this horrible disaster. And if you could bring a tea, that would be great. There are many images that come to mind with Evan. Overwrought teachers, my inability to judge distance when I carried him on my shoulders. He'll tell you that story almost immediately. And his amazing skills in riding. His granny had suggested, how about riding? And he was super skilled. And given the, oh, I think so, it was striking how he could remember a course. Because you're not only remembering the course, you're remembering what you should be doing with the horse as you approach these gates and so on. He was really good at it. And in terms of dismantling racism, I'm ashamed to say the fact that he beat everybody, all those white folks, on their expensive horses, was satisfying. I couldn't get him to tuck his shirt in before the thing, and I made sure he had the most expensive helmet you could get, but beyond that, it was anybody's guess how it was going to go. But generally, he won. I'm sorry, I'm just, yeah. Okay. So, when Evan was about 6, the internet said, you know, if you're dealing with infertility, maybe you should try this. And it's like, oh great, the internet's telling me how to do this. That's terrific. Do I get one of those tubes again? No, okay. And we tried it. Now, the thing with conception is that it's appallingly complex. If you've had 4 children you didn't plan on, you might not think so, but it is incredibly complex. And so, did this thing they recommended work? Or did it take 8 years? It seems a little unlikely, but the fact is you just don't know. So it's Halloween and I'm tying Evan's shoes to go out, and a pregnancy test, positive pregnancy test, goes right through my field of view. And so now we're on the 3rd parenting adventure, which is biological children. Now, I'm going to write a book someday. Well, probably not. This is not the same. So, first off, if you've experienced infertility, you've experienced a series of punishments. Every month, certainly, but also the various procedures and so on. And now you have the child. It's like, well, it worked. And you don't, what I experienced as a father is I didn't want to be the one to break the child. Okay, it's 8 months, the process was clearly fragile in some way, for some reason. And here he is. So the birth of this child, we decided on a home birth. At that time, that wasn't that common, but we went to a hospital and they didn't like the little brown boy wrinkling their sheets and stuff. So I was like, well, we're not going to do that here then. So it was a home birth. That's the time you found the midwife, paid for the midwife, and so on. So there's the room, we're in the bedroom, and the child is coming. Now, Sarah's mom was a midwife, a high health visitor, and her eyes are just like saucers. And she thought Evan could really learn from seeing this. And Evan's eyes are like saucers. And they're like, I don't want to see that side of the action. But it was very sweet. And Evan gave his immortal line, "You should have adopted." So with Evan, I had a sporty child. I would go and help with the horse stuff, picking out hooves, and always making sure you keep your hand the horse, and the horse knows where you are, or the horse will hurt you. It's making sure my check writing hand was limber. Now I had this arty child. He could sing, he could dance amazingly well, and act. A lot of that has gone away to being a nerd, but he was also a nerd, a software engineer in the end. One of my memories of him, and this is what this is about, this is what I think being a father is about. What are your memories of your children, and how did you interact with him? So I go past his bedroom, and he's got these figures out, these knights and so on. And there's an army, and there's all these characters. And he's talking in this little voice that goes right up your back and tingle and everything. And it's, well, as it turns out, the king and the queen are having marital problems. Twat, bastard, you know, and we're trying to work this out with the little voices. There's a soldier who doesn't have an arm. Evan probably helped there. And they've got some kind of rehab plan for the soldier to help bring him along as he adjusts to being armless. So this is the kind of thing that happens when you raise children with psychologists. Evan at one point, you know, this is 2 or 3 years ago, said, I'm dating this person. The psychiatrist thinks that she's bipolar, but I really think she's borderline. Okay, you know, when you look in the big book of I'm trying to be a parent, whatever these roots are, you have intentionally entered the parenting stream. That book doesn't contain that experience. In fact, it doesn't contain a lot of experiences. I went for borderline, but... the other story that I remembered was Juan, as he got older, wanted to go for walks. And he would then suddenly open up with, why would anybody believe in a God? It's like, okay, I was just thinking it was sunny, it was nice. So now there's random theology coming too. This is really what I think of, again, with parenting, is that there is surprises. Delightful surprises, because these little machines are smart and they're wondering about things, and you have a role in reflecting back what that might mean, and you learn a ton. It's really not that one way. You know, I would love to give daily lectures in the house, but really I was learning from the kids. As a final story, when Ingrid and I started dating, she would come to Linden and we would cook a meal and eat by firelight. And her first meeting of Evan, well, at least at Linden, he suddenly burst through the back door. And he's got a leather jacket on, a studded collar, and about 10 other things. And he's trying to take these things off like crazy, as fast as he can. It's like, hi, son. That's not in the book either. So it turned out that Brooklyn and Juan is that other boy that was there, their apartment was being flooded. And they needed a dehumidifier, and they have to stand up or bad things happen. And the only person who had a truck big enough was Evan. And so Evan was going to help. But he knew Brooklyn, Presbyterian, you know, the collar and the thing really wasn't in her game plan. So out of respect, he's taking that off. And then he goes and helps them while the water was coming through a live circuit. He protected his team. And he's just said, I said, well, you're going to miss whatever that's for. And he said, well, she's family, Dad. And the way he said it was like, duh.
Yeah.
She's family. No thing is going to happen. What's going to happen? He's going to go to Mike's apartment and fix the storage locker and get the water out and so on. That's what I celebrate when I think of being a father. These young lads who will help others, who know things, who care.
Yeah.
And I think they came with that package to a degree, and if we got out of the way of it, that's good too. How bad am I for time? I have actually been decompensating up here.
We're running very late, and it doesn't matter, it's the end of term.
Okay, this is another one of those ethical dilemmas. They happen everywhere. I'm going to do one very small thing, because we are at end of term. It would be nice to have coffee and so on. I started seeing a therapist early in the 60s because the 60s, like, what the hell? And it's not going away, and your body's changing and blah, blah, blah. And then you're also wondering, what's it all about, Alfie? If I'd started wondering about 40 years earlier, that would have been cool, but I didn't. And so I tell her that we're going to do this, and she gets so excited. I made the therapist stay and paid her money, so I don't know. And she said, well, there's so many things about parenting, and there's so many angles you could look at. And then she did. She asked the question, did you want to be a father? And I don't have a ready answer. In fact, going right back to the beginning, where it's like, let's have children. And I remember saying, let's have a CD player. We went with the children. Well, eventually, as you can see. You care for a person. You understand the culture as children. You start to think about it. And then you are now in the vortex. I've described the vortex. It's not always like that for everyone. And then you're reading stories to children. And then you're on a horse, briefly. And all of that. So, did you become a father would be the second question. And I said, yes. Yeah. And I prize it. And thanks for the other stories. Lovely. Glad to participate.